Sure. So our topic concerns how we solve problems with Excel. So most of us are, when we think about how to solve an Excel problem, or in the case of the folks who call Kevin up, are, how do I do this? So what they're looking for are Excel skills and technical expertise. But there are other things that actually I think are required, and I wanted to today discuss that. So just one idea from Kevin's website, because I went and looked at it, and on his About page it said that he used to teach foreign language, and he said that helped him break ideas up into different concepts. So also Kevin mentioned passion and necessity. These are the things to help us solve problems, and also being able to explain a solution clearly so that your client or the person you're helping out actually feels confident, has some efficacy in their data. So these ideas that we don't usually think about with Excel, such as like passion, being good at a foreign language, really anything. What are these other things that we should look towards to help us solve problems with Excel? So that is what I would pose to the group. And I saw Oz smiling a lot while I was saying that. So Oz, you want to take it away?
Well, okay, so part of this is driven by Kevin's video about close Super Bowl games, and that excited me because Kevin didn't show how to do any other stuff that he did in the video, and that was exciting because we got to hear the thought process. What counts as a close game? You can look at the final score, but what if the game really was somebody scored a whole lot in the beginning, and then somebody had a late rally, and the whole middle of the game was dull? Or what if it was a defensive struggle, and the entire game was dull, but somebody won 6-9? So defining close game, I found that, wow, that's how we need analysts to think, so that they can call somebody and ask questions. Because I find that that's a lot of where people I work with where they fall down at is not so much in the Excel skill that can be taught, but in asking the question, defining the problem, and saying, okay, there are multiple ways we can define something. Let's put up all of those definitions. Let's say 3 definitions on what we now call a dashboard, so that we can see. But I'll come across an analyst who might want the skill and a manual and step by step. I'll do that, and then I'll go home, but they didn't realize that the numbers looked funny, or that the need to get me all of the sales so that I can do this, this, and this. Well, do you want taxes included in that or not? Do you want shipping and charges included in that or not? What are you trying to do so that I can get you what you need? And that's not fancy Excel formulas. That's an analyst being present.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'll just expand on that a little bit. I couldn't agree more. I think there are certain people who just want to learn how to use every tool in the toolbox, right, without knowing when to use which tool in the toolbox. And having the presence of mind, to me, is so much harder. It's so much harder to teach someone to think in a way that isn't natural for them. Oh, yes. I mean, that is just hard work. That's interview questions where you're trying to get underneath how someone thinks, not necessarily that they've memorized something to be able to tell you on a test. So I couldn't agree with you more. Having an analytical mindset, having a proper way of thinking through problems is so much more interesting to me. Process sort of question, just process engineering, just process sort of questions. How does someone go about? And a little plug here. There'll be a lot of this going on at the past business analytics conference, where I know a lot of the people here will be speaking about how to go about, working through problems, not necessarily just the analytics of it. What do you think, Jordan?
I love the plug. I would say that I agree with all that. I think It's always a function of passion. You really need to actually want to, you know, let me take a step back. I think the thing that we often overlook is that you need to have confidence in your own work. And if you don't have confidence in your own work, you won't be able to express it to someone else. So it doesn't really matter if you are the person asking the question to an Excel expert or the Excel expert helping someone out. You need to have confidence. And in fact, the technical skills are probably less important than being able to confidently answer a question. Because if you can't do that, you won't ever be able to have an answer. I don't know. As I'm saying that, I'm becoming less confident in my own answer. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I would say, ideally you'd have both. Someone that knows a tool, that knows all the little pieces, but they can also do that high-level thing that Rick was talking about to see the whole process, like a vision of everything. Now, if you can't have both, well, I mean, you kind of really do need to have both, but I would say you get someone that has the vision, and then they have to get the right processes, the right people, the right softwares, and get it all lined up and sort of get it working together. Then you've got a really strong machine that can do some amazing things.
Yeah, when people say, I never stop learning in Excel, that's what Bill Jelen always says in his classes. He learns something new every class. I think what they're really saying is that they never stop learning how to think about new problems, right? Because there probably is a topping out point that most of us do, whether it's Excel or anything else, where we say, okay, well, we know enough in terms of technical expertise that if someone gave us a test, maybe we'd have to study, but we do fairly well on. I think, though, that there's a point after that where we actually sort of transcend the technical part and say, well, how can we apply these differently? How do we think about these problems differently? What skills can we bring on to help us think about these problems differently? And that's why I think it's very interesting that Kevin mentioned foreign language, because I don't think that's one that's often associated with Excel, which is usually most people associated with quant stuff, statistics, not necessarily liberal arts, humanities sort of things. But I think everything helps us think about problems differently.
There's a book called The Grammar Book, and it's this big, thick book. When you look at this book, it's just amazing because it breaks down the English language into these structures. And I also love languages. I speak Spanish fairly well. I mean, it's been a long time since I lived down there, but I listen to the radio in Spanish on my lunch break almost every day. And I just love plugging into, somewhere Latin America or Spain and just hearing what's going on, how they think. So languages are also, I think, very analytical. Programming languages.
I agree with that.
Yes, yeah. And you remind me of this guy. He was deaf, and he worked at this cigar store where I worked. And the owner asked him to write a sign, and it was all jumbled up. The words were right, but they were all jumbled up. But I saw it as, wow, this is how he thinks about his language. There it is.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. I really think the importance of language, not to steer this entirely into language, but I read The Elements of Style many years ago, and I think that actually almost changed how I programmed, because it made me think about structures, and it really, that and a few other books, really set up how I try to think about Excel differently, and try to have guiding principles in how I code. So I always think about, what are these other skills required to help us out? Because it's very easy to say, well, more than being good at Excel, you need to know data visualization. Yeah, sure. I mean, but there are other things that you mentioned. Being good at customer facing, being able to understand requirements. When someone tells you, I need this and this, and say, well, is that what they really need? What do they really mean?
Exactly. And this is it's like being a quarterback almost, where it's live. You can't just say, hey, well, hold on, let's just think about this. No. Some guy's running around, the line and coming right at you. So you got to be quick, and that's what makes it fun.
Yes. So let me ask you about that video, because I really like that, and especially the part about not getting all technical with it. Can you tell me about that video, and did you purposefully decide not to get technical?
Yeah, see, that one, there's a lot of formulas, and I thought, no, what's really important here, not like most of my videos where I walk through every little step, but what's the overall picture of this? And I heard someone talking about the Super Bowl, and then I went online, and most people just look at it as the final score, 1 point difference, 3 point difference. but how close was it all the way along? How do you measure that? And sometimes I just daydream where I'm on the train home, and I'm like, well, you got to measure it like every 15 or 30 seconds. Like literally, how do you measure sitting on the edge of your seat watching, football game, basketball game, hockey game? And most of them are close all the way through, but this Super Bowl, right at the very end, like, wow. So there's got to be a bonus, for the last minute or last 30 seconds. If you're within the 10-yard line, and that's pretty exciting.
Well, and so let me back up and describe. So you start and you say close game, and the final score looks close or it doesn't look close. And so you start to think about how to define close. And you could have said, like, what are the scores at the halves or at the quarters? But, right, the edge of your seat thing, how do we measure, how much of the game really did have a close score? How long did it go with no change in score? All of these different ways you could think about measuring close.
Well, really for me it was like you can't really measure excitement. I mean that's pretty hard because some close games are boring. You'd have to have like a team of people trying to do something there, measuring your pulse. But that came to me pretty fast. Then it's just a matter of, is it every 30 seconds, every minute, every 15 seconds? You have to do all the formulas, but sports analytics these days, it is just like a revolution. Especially baseball's had it for a while with Moneyball, but basketball and hockey now, trying to measure a sport that's that fast, very challenging to do.
I went to a meetup where somebody, I don't know where I found out about this. That doesn't matter. But he looked at the previous Super Bowl. And somebody had broken it down to show that the running backs had an average game, the quarterbacks had an average game, all of this average. But the Seahawks defense, they had a stellar game. And that seems to be why the Seahawks did win that Super Bowl.